Hey everybody, Dr. West here, and thank you so much for joining me tonight for our ADHD and sensory processing workshop slash webinar. I know parents, a lot of you are here looking for answers to what's going on with your kid, but also some solutions to what's going on with your kid, because I understand from all the parents that we've seen and all the kids that we've seen in our office that the daily grind of getting clothes on in the morning and sending kids off to school but not knowing what they're going to come back with either a note or you're going to get a phone call in the day, but also dealing with issues like such like texture and other things that these kids often have problems with. One of our biggest passions in our office is to make sure that kiddos and families that are faced with the challenges of ADHD or other sensory issues are found to be empowered and welcoming. These issues are incredibly common, though they're not normal, and we've seen how the stress of one of these issues can actually affect the entire family. That's one reason why you're here tonight watching this, is because you're probably feeling the stress that your kid or someone else that you know is dealing with some of these problems. So tonight I want to go over a couple things, 3 to be exact. And normally I have this talk as an hour and a half, but I'm going to try to condense it down to about 15-20 minutes. That way we can get in and get out to get you guys the information that you need in order to make empowered decisions. First, what we're going to talk about is where we are today, and that's going to be as a community, as a country. Then we're going to talk about where we need to go as the same community and country, but how we're going to get there as well. So, in today's day and age, there are 6.4 million kids in the United States that are diagnosed with ADHD. Most of the time, they're between 4 and 17. That's where the stats are from. That's 10% of kids in the United States. There's 10% of kids in the United States are diagnosed with brain disorder, which is crazy to think about. Now, some other stats: the boys are 3 times more likely to have ADHD than girls. And parents, I know that you understand this, is that this started earlier than age 7, which is the average age of diagnosis. You started noticing these things a little farther back and a little farther back. Usually around the age of 3 is when you really start to see that they're starting to miss their milestones. They're a little bit delayed. They have some issues going on. But especially with these kids in that age group, what's going on? What's going on with them at that time? So I want to take a step back and talk about development with these kids. Around age 5 is when the foundation for our entire nervous system and the development for our nervous system is formed. And so these kids are having to develop around their development. They have to work around the stress that they're dealing with in order to become the people that they're meant to be. And this is a big problem, but we don't know what's causing it, or do we? A lot of theories are that there's a natural chemical imbalance with the brain. Other theories are that there's actually improper development of parts of the brain, mainly the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is newer when it comes to us. That's what makes us human. It makes us control our emotions, it makes us control our thoughts, and plan out our actions. The problem is that these chemical imbalances and this improper development of the brain is actually rooted with one cause, and that's stress. Whether it's taxing on the system when it comes to emotional stress or chemical stress or physical stress, and we'll get to those later, it overloads the brain and makes us go into the hindbrain. It makes us go into the back of the old brain that's all instinctual. It's the stuff that makes us react to things without even thinking about it. Now, when we look at the brain is actually just a giant processor. It's what coordinates in all functions in the entire body, whether it's me raising my arm, whether it's my heart beating, whether it's my lungs breathing, digestion, immune function, tons of stuff. It's constantly taking control of. Most of the time we don't even realize it. Now, what is the brain also connected to? Well, it's connected to the body through the spinal cord and the nervous system. And the main job for the nervous system is to provide sensory input into the brain. So the sensory input is going to be the cars driving past the office. It's going to be the lights in here. It's going to be the skin, the clothing that's touching our skin. It's all feeding into the brain and telling these kids what's going on. It's super important because the brain has to understand the environment in order to perceive the functions of daily life. So What happens when that system gets overloaded with stress or there's just too much bombardment of stuff? A couple things happen. Let's take your computer for example, or your phone, wherever you're watching this video on. If you take that phone and you drop it against the ground a couple times, if you spill water or something on your computer, if you have a ton of programs open on it and it's just getting bogged down because there's so much to do and so much, there's not enough resources to do all the tasks that you're trying to get done, the computer's going to slow down. That's essentially what's happening with these kids. They're getting stuck in this fight or flight response because there's so much stress in their environment and it's coming all onto them. The thing though, parents, is that this is okay. It's totally natural and normal for our body to go into this survival mode. The problem we have with these kids is that they go into survival mode at a very young age, but also for an extended period of time. And there's been studies that actually show that chronic stress will decrease sizes of the brain. And these kids, though they're infants and young kids and teenagers, they have just as much, if not more, stress than we do as adults. Now you're probably wondering, well, what is all this stress I keep talking about? Why do I keep talking about stress? How are they getting exposed to this much stress? It's just an infant, just a baby. They're 3 years old. They can't be stressed about that much. Well, when you look at stress overall, there's 3 main categories. So the first category is going to be physical. So did you know by the time you're 5 years old, you fall about 2,000 times when you learn to walk? Well, how are these kids with their posture? How are these kids when they sleep? Are they active most of the day, or are they sitting down on the couch playing video games? All that stuff will lead up to a lot of this, okay? Now, another big stress, big physical stress, is the birth process. Whether it's a natural vaginal water birth, or it's in a hospital with a C-section or forceps or vacuum, doesn't matter. The process of birth is still stressful, no matter what. And moms, I know you agree with me on that. But there's actually a study done in 2015 that showed even the most calm births will cause a physical impact on these kids, mainly in their upper neck when they're coming out. And it actually showed that 95% of kids that go through the birth process, which is everybody, will have that physiological impact in the neck. So that right there is beginning the fuel to the fire that is sensory and ADHD. And that's 9 out of 10 cases that we see in the office that have severe issues tend to have a really tough birth story. Now, moving on from physical stress, because that is very important, but there's 2 other categories. The other ones are chemical. With these kids, and the fact that they're growing and they're going through the largest stage of growth in their entire life within those first 5 years, they eat everything. So diet is huge. Diet, and a clean diet by that, is really important. And it doesn't matter if there is formula introduced early on in life, because of certain situations it's completely fine and normal and healthy, or these kids just tend to have a sensitivity to gluten or sugar or dairy. All this stuff will start to add in and build into itself and build the stress response. The third is going to be emotional stress. Now, parents are probably wondering, emotional stress, it's an infant, it can't be that stressed. Well, infants are so tightly connected with their parents and that bonding, is that they will actually feel the emotional stress of mom and dad. They can pick up on that stuff. And when it comes to adults, we have a fully formed brain. By the age 25, we have a fully formed brain. And the last thing to form is actually that prefrontal cortex. And so that's that decision making, that's all those skills. But a big response to a lot of that is that we have all these strategies and techniques to deal with our stress. And I like to talk about a bucket with this. When we are dealing with stress as adults, we have a big bucket. We can throw a lot of stress in there before we really start to feel bogged down or gunked up, like that phone I was talking about. But the younger we get, the smaller the bucket. And so there doesn't take as much physiological stress in order to have some type of problem shift them into that survival mode, all right? And so that's when they start dealing with some of these challenges. And it doesn't matter if it's a family issue or if it's just an overload of social media, like our teenagers, it will all affect us the same way. So that's where we are right now. We're stuck in the survival mode and stress. These kids are stuck in survival mode and stress. So where do we need to go? We need to go to a place where we can imagine kids are being born healthy from the very beginning. They don't have colic, they don't have reflux, they sleep well. When you hold them, they just melt into you. They're not super strong, they're not super limp, but they also grow into healthy teenagers without asthma or allergies or ear infections. And a lot of these kids, they don't grow out of these issues. They grow into more and more issues. And that's where we need to go as a community. But we have to start that one family at a time. And the thing is that whether it's an 11-year-old boy that has issues with the alarms and the sensory and ADHD, like we posted the other day, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, it still affects him the same way. If you look at the girls that we see in our office, one in particular, massive digestive problems, anxiety, but most impactful at her was the bedwetting. She was wetting the bed almost nightly. And the last 2 weeks, she hasn't wet the bed. He can sit through a fire alarm at school now and relax and calm down. And it's amazing what happens when you can calm that nervous system. You can give them strategies to be able to deal with some of that stress. And the confidence that these kids have is amazing, because these kids are the smartest kids. They're the most amazing kids. They have to work through some of this stuff. And they have to work out of that survival mode and get back to where they're supposed to be healthy and happy, because every kid deserves to be that way. Now, we help these kids in our office because we use a system called Insight Subluxation Station. And what that does is it actually looks at the nervous system, sees where they are in that fight or flight response, and see where we need to go with it. It shows us a detailed assessment of their neurological and developmental health, which is incredibly important. And that's one of the ways that we're going to get to where we need to go, all right? But parents, I know you want some action steps tonight. You want to work on this stuff right now. You're looking for answers, and I want to make sure you leave this webinar with some things that you can do, all right? So first thing, parents, ask questions. Never be afraid to ask a question. Whether it's a friend, a colleague, a doctor, a therapist, ask as many questions. If you feel like you need to ask a question, but you don't know what question to ask, the best question to ask is always why. Be Socratic with this stuff. Because from my experience, an empowered parent, when it comes to knowledge, is a powerful parent that's going to make the right decision for your child. The second thing you guys can do is you can try to reduce those 3 stressors, this physical, the chemical, and the emotional stressors with these kids. You're not going to be able to eliminate all stress, but you can do things to help reduce some of that, okay? When you're looking at diet, are you trying to give them things that like mac and cheese, that it's filled with preservatives? And I understand with some of these kids, they have some texture issues when it comes to sensory, but there's other healthier alternatives out there where you can remove that gluten, you can remove some of that processed stuff. A big part of it too with these kids, especially boys with ADHD, is get them in some type of activity where they burn off some of this energy. A lot of their issues will go into expulsion of energy, or girls will tend to be more reserved and kind of shut down. That's where you see the difference between depression, anxiety with teenage girls and ADHD and behavior issues with boys, is that it's the same problem, but it just shows itself 2 different ways, because boys and girls are wired just a little bit different when it comes to the brain. And the third thing you can do is, or for the stressors, is don't forget the emotional stress. Get them journaling. Get them to do some type of stress-free activity, like kids yoga or aromatherapy. Something that will help them calm down, that can ease the system and let their mind kind of get off of Facebook, get off of social media. That type of stuff will overwhelm the system really easily. But basically what we need to do, and the third thing that we need to do with these kids, is we need to build that calming state. Because they're such in that alarm and like something's going off, but we need to build up their calming state so that alarm will go down, all right? We need to get them to tap on that brake system. They're in go, go, go mode. That's what firing off the walls and bouncing off the walls half the time. They can't calm themselves. We have to tap the brakes. And the better we're able to establish that calming mood, the easier we'll be able to break those behavior habits and make changes to the patterns of stress that form in the system. So that way healing and digestion and immune function and development can occur at the way it's supposed to be and as intended. This is what chiropractic does best when it comes to these kids. It provides this tapping on the brake system, so that way they can create this calming ripple effect, so that way it doesn't affect just him or her, but the entire family. Because we understand that this ADHD or sensory issue isn't just a kid issue, it's a family issue, and it affects everybody. So, if this resonated with you, or you know someone that's struggling, is looking for something, because what they're doing isn't doing getting the job done, but also isn't they're looking for more answers, please reach out to us or share this video with them. We know of offices all over the country, so feel free to share this video because it still applies. Because we know plenty of doctors and offices that are just as passionate about helping these kids and helping these families as much as we are. So thank you so much for your attention tonight. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all, or if you'd like to know more information on how we might be able to help you or your family thrive. Thank you guys.